Welcome to Cuelist Tutorials. In this tutorial, we're going to discuss modifying cues. In our previous tutorial, we talked about how to create cues, but you can also modify a cue once it's been created in several ways. The first thing to understand is that we have two parts of the cue marker and the cue box. You can move a cue marker on your page just by clicking and dragging. The cue marker will move and the cue box will automatically fall in line as best it can. If there's a stack of cues, it may not quite make a straight line, but it will try its best to be in line with the cue marker. If we take a resizable box cue marker and we move it, we can grab it and we can also resize it. So it's pretty simple to move our cues around. As discussed in the editing cue properties tutorial, you can set your cue's default position to be the page's left or right side. And remember, we do that here in layers. We go down and we edit the cue properties, and you can see that our default placement is the right side of the page. If we change that default placement, our cues will move to the other side of the page. So you can always move them back and forth, and you do this on a layer by layer basis. So that's always an option. In addition, you can take a cue and move it to a specific position by doing what we call untethering the cue. And that requires going into this little triangle in the corner, clicking, and now you have the ability to move the cue anywhere you like. If you move the cue box is not going to affect the placement of the cue. So if we move the cue, you'll see it's staying in line, unlike our cues here where if we move them, everything's moving in line. So this is just a good way to lock a cue down, and it allows you to set the cue in place. If you want to retether the cue, just go back up to that triangle and right click in the same place. You can also view the cues off the page as long as you're in single page view on your PDF, and we discussed that in the previous tutorial. But if you go up here to the margin view and you flip this switch, it will move all of your tethered cues off the page. Now, if we have a untethered cue, so we take this cue and we untether it and we move the margin view, you can see here that that cue will no longer move because it is locked in place. It's important to note that if we go into the margin view and we switch to a double page view, our cues will move back onto the page. They'll move back into the margin as soon as we go onto a single page view. Again, very important to remember that the cue marker, so where the cue falls on the script, is going to be the same for every user. But all of this, where the cue is, whether it's on the right side or the left side, whether it's untethered or tethered, whether it's in the margin, that is unique to you as the user. And you have control over what you're going to see. So don't worry about impacting other users. Okay, there are a lot of other editing options. Now, just as a reminder, when we go into the layer options and we look down at editing cue properties, we see a lot of options here. We see that we can create both the number and title and the label visible in the cue, or we can just have one of these two. You have to have at least one. If we do that, if we say turn off the label will disappear on our cues. It's still, the information is still there, but the label is gone from our individual cues. We can also control the default cue size, making the cues larger or smaller. We can control the box opacity, that's the opacity here, and the line opacity, that's the line between our cue marker and our cue. In addition, we can have standard attributes. If these are light cues, we can go in and turn on any lighting attributes or turn off any attributes we want. There's also sound and other attributes. We've talked about this in another tutorial. So once we have that all set up, all of our queues are going to default to those choices. But on a unique queue by queue basis, we can go back in and change any of those queues by clicking in the layer name. And here you can see a lot of options. We can delete the queue. We can change the page of the queue. So if we want to move this queue a page, we can pick the page, or we can select just one page forward or one page backward, hit the word done, and it will move the queue to a new page. We can also change the queue's layer. So in this case, we can change the queue from LX to sound. As soon as we do that, you can see it takes on the attributes of the sound queue. Now we're going back to the LX queue. We can make, for this individual queue, we can make the label visible. We can also change the individual size, the individual opacity, and we can always change the marker from a line to a resizable box or the other way around. Now, in addition, if we click here on the colored box on the left, we can add attributes to this queue. Description, these are the attributes we chose in the default layer options, but we can add anything we want here. At the bottom of these attribute notes, you'll notice there's a little checkbox and a work note. If we add a work note, it's going to put this queue, list it as one of our work note queues. Now, you can do that by left clicking here and opening the attributes and going down and putting that information in. You can also do it by right clicking anywhere in the layer name or the colored box, and it will take you directly to a work note box. You can put in a work note, make this brighter, for instance, and we're going to hit return. You'll notice that the queue now has a star on it, denoting that it is a work note queue. And then up here, we will have created a work note list, and that work note list will allow us to keep track of all the work notes that are inside our queue. We can go back in and just right click, and once this work note is done, we can hit the archive button and it will save that work note and remove the markings that show that queue needs a work note. The last thing to note is that every time we add a queue, that queue is going to appear here on our list view. So we can see that every queue that's added is going to automatically populate our list view. We can make changes to all the information here, including the layers, the queue number, the label, any information, as well as adding work notes here in the list view just by clicking inside the spreadsheet. So if you are trying to make a lot of changes to a number of queues, it's often easier to go into our spreadsheet view. In addition, we can go here into a page, click directly on that page, and it will take us back into our PDF view. Okay, that's it for modifying queues. Thanks for watching.